It's time to go, Elena. Mark's voice was sharp, cutting through the fog in my brain. I stared at the small patch of fresh dirt. It was too small. A grave shouldn't be that small. Elena, he repeated, tugging my arm. I turned to him. His black suit was crisp, untouched by the rain. Are you coming with us? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I can't, he said, checking his watch impatiently. I have to handle the paperwork. The billing is a mess, no? Mark, we just buried our son. Someone has to be rational, he sighed, pushing me toward the waiting black car. Go with Aunt Martha. You're a mess. Go home and sleep. I need you, I whispered. I'll be there in an hour. Just go. He turned his back on me. I felt cold. Colder than the rain, Aunt Martha was waiting by the car. She grabbed my hand, her grip tight and shaking. Where the hell is he going? She snapped, watching Mark walk toward the cemetery office. Paperwork, I mumbled, sliding into the passenger seat. Paperwork? Martha slammed her door shut, the sound echoing loudly. On the day of his child's funeral? That man has ice in his veins, Elena. Please, Auntie. I leaned my head against the cool window. I can't fight today. I just want to go home. He should be holding your hand. He should be grieving. He grieves in his own way. By looking at spreadsheets? Martha scoffed, starting the engine with a roar. You deserve better. I've always said it. I just want silence, I said softly. The drive was a blur of gray trees and heavy rain. When we arrived, the house loomed over us, dark and quiet. Do you want me to come in? Martha asked, her eyes full of pity. No, I lied, forcing a weak smile. Mark will be back soon. I'll just take a nap. Call me. For anything. I will. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The silence hit me like a physical blow. It was suffocating. The house smelled of stale lily and despair. I kicked off my muddy heels. I didn't want to be in the living room. I didn't want to be anywhere. I just wanted my bed. I dragged myself up the stairs, clutching the banister. 1 step, 2 steps. I reached the landing. The door to the nursery was closed. I couldn't look at it. I turned toward the master bedroom, but then I froze. A sound, a soft, high-pitched giggle. It came from the guest room. I held my breath. Maybe I was hallucinating. Maybe grief had finally snapped my mind. Stop, a familiar voice whispered. You're bad, Mark? He was supposed to be at the cemetery. I walked to the guest room door. My hand shook uncontrollably as I gripped the cold brass handle. Mark? I breathed out. I pushed the door open. The sheets were tangled. 2 bodies were intertwined. Mark looked up, his face twisting in shock. Elena, he shouted. He wasn't handling paperwork. He was in bed with her. The scream got stuck in my chest, a hard lump that wouldn't move. The woman in the bed turned slowly, brushing hair out of her face. It wasn't a stranger. Sarah? My voice cracked, barely a sound. My best friend. The woman who sat next to me in the waiting room when the doctor told me there was no heartbeat. The woman who brought me soup yesterday and told me I was strong. Elena, Sarah said. She didn't flinch. She didn't cover herself in shame or try to hide. She just looked at me with soft, sickening pity. You shouldn't be here yet. I pointed a shaking finger at her, then at Mark. You're supposed to be my friend. Mark was scrambling, trying to pull his pants up, tripping over his own feet. Elena, listen to me. It's not, we were just talking and emotions got high. Talking? I stared at his bare chest. You told me you were doing paperwork for our dead son's grave. You rushed me out of the cemetery? I was upset. Mark yelled, his face turning red as he buttoned his shirt wrong. I needed comfort. You've been a zombie for weeks, Elena. I have needs too. I needed someone who is actually alive. The words slapped me harder than a physical blow. He didn't mean that, Sarah said, her voice calm, reasonable. It was terrifying. She sounded like she was mediating a petty argument instead of sitting naked in my guest bed. He's just grieving, Elle. We both are. We were just finding solace. Solace? I whispered. The room started to spin. You skipped the burial. You left me alone at the grave to come here and find solace? You weren't alone, Sarah said gently, tilting her head. You had your aunt. Mark needed me more. Get out, I gasped. The nausea hit me in a violent wave. Get out of my house. Mark stepped toward me, reaching out. Baby, calm down. You're hysterical. It's the hormones. You're not thinking clearly. Don't touch me. I shrieked, stumbling backward into the hallway. Elena, let's talk about this downstairs, Mark pleaded, glancing at Sarah for help. You're making a scene. A scene? I laughed, a broken, jagged sound. Our baby is in the ground, Mark. The dirt isn't even dry. I couldn't look at them. If I stayed one more second, I would do something I couldn't take back. I would kill him, or her, or myself. I turned and ran. I nearly fell down the stairs, my legs feeling like lead. Elena. Come back, Mark's voice chased me, but I didn't stop. I burst out the front door, gasping for air. The cold wind hit my tear-streaked face. I made it to the middle of the lawn before my knees gave out. I collapsed into the wet grass, clutching my stomach, trying to keep my insides from spilling out. Mrs. Vance? A sharp voice came from the sidewalk. I looked up through the blur of tears. Mrs. Higgins was standing there, holding a garden hose, staring at me over the hedge. Her eyes were wide behind her glasses. Are you all right, dear? She called out, her gaze darting from me to the open front door where Mark was now standing, shirtless. I heard shouting. I choked, gripping the grass until my knuckles turned white. He wasn't at the cemetery. What? Mrs. Higgins stepped closer, turning off the water. He wasn't working, I sobbed, the realization crushing my ribs. He came home. To be with her. It wasn't just sex. He had looked at the clock during the funeral, not because he was sad, but because he was checking how much time he had with Sarah. He chose her over saying goodbye to our child. The betrayal wasn't just a knife in my back. It was a shovel digging up my grief. The phone buzzed against the cheap laminate nightstand for the 50th time. The screen lit up the dark, musty hotel room. Mark. I had been staring at the ceiling for hours, the image of them tangled in my sheets playing on a loop behind my eyelids. I finally reached out and swiped the green button. Elena, finally. Mark's voice wasn't worried. It was annoyed. Where the hell are you? You're acting like a child. A child? I croaked, my throat raw. I saw you, Mark. I saw Sarah. You saw what your grief wanted you to see, he snapped. You are hysterical, Elena. It's the hormones. The doctor said you'd be unstable after the delivery. I am not unstable. You were in bed with her. I was changing my shirt. I spilled coffee on it. He lied smoothly, his voice rising in fake indignation. Sarah was just there to help me find a fresh one. She was comforting me because my wife abandoned me at the cemetery to go take a nap. You're lying, I whispered, gripping the phone tight. I heard her giggle. You're hearing things, you're having a breakdown. Come home so I can take care of you. Stop making up stories to villainize me. I'm not coming back tonight. Fine, pout, but when you wake up and realize how crazy you sound, don't expect me to apologize for being comforted by a friend. He hung up. I stared at the phone. For a second, I almost believed him. Was I crazy? Was it the grief? Then I remembered the look in Sarah's eyes. It wasn't comfort. It was possession. The sadness in my chest hardened into something cold and heavy. I wasn't going to let him make me the crazy one. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I hadn't used in years. Julian Lalier? He answered on the second ring. Elena? His voice was deep and cautious. I heard about the baby. I am so sorry. I don't need condolences, Julian, I said, my voice steady for the first time all day. I need a divorce lawyer. The meanest one you know. That would be me, he said without missing a beat. Meet me at the grind in 30 minutes. I washed my face with cold water and drove to the coffee shop. Julian was already there, wearing a suit that cost more than my car. He stood up when he saw me, his face softening. You look like hell, Elle, he said, pulling out a chair for me. Mark is sleeping with Sarah, I said, dropping into the seat. I walked in on them after the funeral. Julian's eyes went wide. Sarah? Your maid of honor, Sarah? Yes, and now he's telling me I'm hallucinating. He says I'm hysterical. I recounted the phone call, the gaslighting, the money I suspected was missing. Julian listened, his expression shifting from shock to a cold, predatory focus. He didn't interrupt. He just tapped his pen against the table. When I finished, I wiped a fresh tear from my cheek. Maybe he's right. Maybe I am just broken. Julian reached across the table and grabbed my hand. His grip was firm. He is gaslighting you, Elena. It's a tactic to make you question reality so you don't fight back. He thinks you're weak. I am weak. I whispered. I just buried my son. You are grieving, not weak, Julian said sharply. But listen to me closely. You need to stop crying. Crying won't destroy them. He let go of my hand and opened his briefcase, pulling out a yellow legal pad. But a plan will, he said, his eyes dark and serious. Are you ready to stop being the victim and start being the nightmare? I looked at him. I took a deep breath. Tell me what to do. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, keeping my head down. I had to look defeated. I had to look like the broken wife he believed I was. Mark was sitting on the couch, a beer in his hand. He didn't stand up. He just looked at me with a smug, satisfied expression. You're back, he said, taking a slow sip. I figured you'd run out of steam eventually. I didn't mean to leave, I whispered, staring at my shoes. I was just overwhelmed. Julian said I should come home and rest. Julian? Mark narrowed his eyes. Since when do you talk to him? I ran into him. He just said I looked tired. I kept my voice flat, lifeless. You were right, Mark. I think the grief is making me imagine things. I'm sorry I yelled. Mark let out a long, dramatic sigh and set his beer down. Well, at least you're admitting it. It's hard for me too, Elena. I need support, not accusations. I know, I lied. The taste of the lie was bitter on my tongue. I'll go lie down. Good idea, he said, standing up and stretching. I'm going to hop in the shower. Try to pull yourself together by dinner. He walked past me, patting my shoulder patronizingly. He left his phone sitting face up on the coffee table. I waited until I heard the bathroom door click shut upstairs. Then I waited for the sound of the water. Hiss. The shower started. I moved instantly. I grabbed his phone. The passcode was still 1212 our anniversary. The irony almost made me laugh. I opened his messages. Sarah's name wasn't there. He had changed it to Jim Buddy. I clicked on the thread. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just a one-time mistake. The messages went back months. Mark, she's stuck in bed again. Doctor's orders. I'm going crazy here. Sarah, poor baby, you have needs. She looks like a beached whale anyway. Mark, I miss your body. Hers is ruined. I checked the date. June 12th. I was on strict bed rest, terrified I would lose the baby. While I was praying for our son's life, they were mocking my swollen body. I didn't cry. My eyes were dry and burning. I took screenshots of everything, the dates, the nudes she sent, the cruel jokes about my hormones. I sent them all to a secret cloud account and deleted the evidence from his sent folder. I put the phone back exactly where it was. I needed an ally, someone who knew Sarah's poison. I went to the backyard and dialed a number. Hello? A rough, suspicious voice answered. Chloe, it's Elena. Elena? Her tone softened slightly. I heard about the baby. I didn't think you'd want to hear from Sarah's sister. I don't want to talk to Sarah, I said, my voice low. I want to take her down. Silence stretched on the line. Then Chloe let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Finally. What did the witch do? She's sleeping with Mark. They've been doing it for months, even while I was pregnant. I knew it, Chloe hissed. I knew she was up to something. She's been asking about your house value for weeks. She wants my life, Chloe. She's always wanted your life. Elena, Chloe said, her voice dripping with old resentment. Since we were kids. She hated that you were the pretty one, the smart one, the one who got the good guy. She doesn't love Mark. She just loves taking what's yours. I'm going to divorce him, I said. But I need to destroy them first. Good, Chloe said. Count me in. I'm tired of living in her shadow. What do you need? Be my eyes, I said, looking up at the bathroom window where the steam was rising. When I'm not around, tell me everything she does. Consider it done, Chloe promised. She thinks she's untouchable. Let's prove her wrong. Transaction denied. The red notification on my banking app mocked me. I stood in the middle of the grocery aisle, staring at the screen. I tapped into the transaction history, my heart pounding against my ribs. Zales Jewelers, $3,500, Vista Apartments, $2,800, the Ritz-Carlton, $600. My breath hitched. This was the savings account. The money we had scraped together for the nursery, for the college fund, for the life we were supposed to build. It was gone. All of it, he hadn't just cheated on me. He had financed his affair with our child's future. I didn't cry. Tears were for the weak, and I was done being weak. I dialed a number. Derek? It's Elena. I know it's soon, but can we have lunch? 2 hours later, I sat across from Mark's boss at a quiet bistro. Derek looked uncomfortable, likely expecting a weeping widow. I gave him a brave, tired smile. Thank you for meeting me, Derek, I said softly. Of course, Elena, Derek replied, cutting his steak with precision. We're all worried about you. And Mark, of course. How is he? He's struggling, I lied, looking down at my untouched salad. He's trying to distract himself. The spending helps, I think. Spending? Derek paused, fork midair. Oh, I shouldn't say anything, I said quickly, widening my eyes. It's just the bills are piling up. I'm worried about our finances. But he says the trips were necessary for the company. What trips? Derek asked, his voice dropping. You know, the weekends in Miami and the client dinners at the Ritz? I tilted my head, looking confused. He said he had to use the corporate card because it was a business emergency. Derek put his fork down slowly. His face went rigid. Elena, we haven't had a client in Miami for 3 years. And nobody's authorized to use the corporate card for personal dinners. Oh no, I whispered, covering my mouth. Maybe I misunderstood. I saw the receipts in his bag, diamond earrings, hotel rooms. He told me they were gifts for the new investors. That's why he's been staying late every night, right? To woo the new clients? Derek sat back, wiping his mouth with a napkin. The sympathy in his eyes was replaced by cold, hard calculation. Mark hasn't been staying late, Elena. He leaves at 5 o'clock sharp every single day. Then where does he go? I asked, letting my voice tremble. I don't know, Derek muttered, pulling out his phone, but I intend to find out. And I'm going to pull the audit logs for those credit cards immediately. Please, don't be mad at him, I pleaded, reaching for his hand. He's just grieving. He's not himself. Stealing from the company isn't grieving, Elena. It's a crime. Derek stood up, throwing cash on the table. You stay here, eat. I have to go back to the office. I watched him storm out. Mark thought he was smart, but he had just made an enemy of the man who signed his paychecks. You don't have to do this, Elena, Dr. Evans had said during our session that morning. Hosting a dinner party 2 weeks after the funeral, with her there? It's psychological torture. It's not torture, doctor, I had whispered, applying my red lipstick like war paint in the mirror. It's a stage. Now, standing in the kitchen, the smell of roasting lamb made my stomach turn. Mark paced back and forth behind me, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time. He was sweating. Is the wine breathing? He snapped. Derek and his wife will be here any minute. We need to look functional, Elena. Broken people make others uncomfortable. And why is Sarah coming? I asked, smoothing the fabric of my black dress. I told you I didn't want her here. Because she's our best friend, Mark said, avoiding my eyes as he arranged napkins. If she isn't here, people will talk. They'll wonder why she's suddenly excluded. We need to show a united front. United, I repeated. Right, the doorbell rang. The next hour was a blur of forced smiles and hollow condolences. Derek looked at me with pity, likely remembering the financial worries I had shared at lunch. He watched Mark like a hawk. Then the door opened and Sarah walked in. She wore a tight red dress, bold, bright, and completely disrespectful for a house of mourning. Elena. She moved to hug me, smelling of Mark's cologne. I stiffened but didn't pull away. Hello, Sarah, I said coolly. I'm so glad you're feeling up to this, she said loud enough for everyone to hear, patting my arm. I told Mark I was worried it was too soon for you. Mark can be very persuasive, I said, catching Mark's eye across the room. He looked away quickly, pouring himself a drink. Dinner was an agonizing performance. Mark played the doting husband, filling my water glass, touching my hand, acting the part of the grieving survivor. Sarah sat across from him, her foot occasionally bumping his under the table. She thought I didn't notice. She thought I was stupid. So, Derek's wife said, breaking a heavy silence, Have you two thought about taking a vacation? Getting away from it all? We're thinking about it, Mark said quickly, smiling too wide. Maybe Europe. A fresh start. Actually, I interrupted, pushing my chair back. I stood up and tapped my spoon against my wine glass. Clink, clink. The room went silent. Mark looked up, panic flashing in his eyes. I want to make a toast, I announced, smiling brightly. Elena, sit down, Mark hissed under his breath, gripping the tablecloth. You're tired. No, I insist, I said, raising my glass high. To friends. True friends who step in when life falls apart. I turned my gaze directly to Sarah. She froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. Especially you, Sarah, I said, my voice sweet as poison. I want to thank you publicly. Elena, Sarah shifted in her seat, her eyes darting to Mark. No, really, I continued, widening my smile. When I was too hysterical to function, when I was too busy crying over the tiny coffin to be a good wife, you were there. You stepped in to comfort Mark in ways I couldn't. The silence at the table changed. It wasn't polite anymore. It was heavy, suffocating. Confused glances darted between the guests. You really gave him the solace he needed, I finished, emphasizing the words she had used in the bedroom. Not many best friends would go to such lengths. You even skipped the burial just to make sure he wasn't lonely. That is true loyalty, isn't it? Derek choked on his water, coughing loudly into his napkin. Sarah's face turned a violent shade of crimson. She looked down at her plate, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Elena! Mark stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. That's enough wine for you. Did I say something wrong? I asked innocently, blinking at the guests who were now staring at the table in horror. I'm just grateful. Mark told me how much you helped him release his stress. I think we should skip to dessert. Mark stammered, his face pale, sweat beading on his forehead. Oh, I'm full, I said, sitting back down and taking a long, slow sip of wine. I've had quite enough. I watched Sarah squirm, picking at her napkin. I watched Mark glare at me with pure hatred. Dr. Evans was wrong. This wasn't torture. It was the first time in weeks I had enjoyed a meal. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 in the afternoon. I knew it wasn't Mark. He was at the office, pretending to work while likely browsing real estate listings for a new life. I opened the door. Sarah stood there. She wasn't hiding anymore. She looked radiant, her skin glowing, wearing a sundress that fluttered in the breeze. She didn't wait for an invitation. She breezed past me into the hallway, smelling of vanilla and arrogance. Mark isn't here, I said, closing the door. I slipped my hand into the pocket of my cardigan and double-tapped the screen of my phone. Recording started. I know, Sarah said, turning to face me in the living room. She ran a hand over the back of my favorite armchair. I didn't come to see him. I came to help you face reality, Elena. Reality? I asked, leaning against the doorframe to support my shaking legs. I think I'm facing it just fine. You're holding on to something that's already dead, she said, her voice dropping to a pitying whisper that made my skin crawl. She looked me up and down, then placed a hand deliberately over her stomach. It was a protective, possessive gesture. My eyes locked onto her hand. The words stuck in my throat like a shard of glass. Pregnant, she finished for me, a smug smile curling her lips. 6 weeks. It happened right before, you know? Before the funeral. The air left the room. My knees felt weak, but I locked them tight. Does Mark know? I asked, keeping my voice terrifyingly steady. Of course he knows. He's thrilled, Elena. He's been wanting this for so long. She took a step closer, her eyes gleaming with malice. Mark needs a family. He needs a legacy. You couldn't give him that, could you? The cruelty of it took my breath away. She was using the corpse of my son as a stepping stone. She wasn't just stabbing me. She was twisting the knife to see if I would bleed. You think you can replace my son? I whispered. I'm giving him a living child, she said coldly. He feels bad for you, obviously. That's why he hasn't kicked you out yet. He's afraid you'll do something drastic if he walks out now. But we both know it's over. He loves me, Elena. He loves us. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear her hair out and drag her out of my house. I wanted to break every piece of furniture in the room. But then I heard Jillian's voice in my head. Crying won't destroy them. A plan will. I took a deep breath. I uncurled my fists. I forced the corners of my mouth up into a calm, polite smile. Well, I said, my voice bright. Congratulations, Sarah. Sarah blinked. Her smug expression faltered. She took a step back. What? I said, congratulations, I repeated, walking over to the side table to pour a glass of water. My hand didn't shake. A baby is a blessing. Even under these circumstances. I'm happy for Mark. He really does want to be a father. You're happy? Sarah stammered, looking confused. She had come here for a fight. She wanted tears. She wanted me to beg. Why wouldn't I be? I shrugged, taking a sip. If he loves you and you're giving him what he wants, then I shouldn't stand in the way. It sounds like you two have everything figured out. We do, she said, narrowing her eyes, trying to find the crack in my armor. We're going to be a real family. That's great, I said. I hope the house is big enough for all three of you. It will be, she snapped, unsettled by my lack of rage. He's going to serve you papers soon, Elena. Don't make it difficult. I wouldn't dream of it, I smiled. Take care of yourself, Sarah. Stress isn't good for the baby. She stared at me for another moment, looking for the breakdown, but I gave her nothing but ice. Finally, she huffed, tossed her hair, and turned toward the door. You're weird, she muttered as she left. I locked the door behind her. I pulled my phone from my pocket and stopped the recording. I'm not weird, I whispered to the empty room. I'm prepared. This recording is lethal, Elena. Julian set his phone down on the mahogany desk, a cold smile playing on his lips. He admits to the affair, the pregnancy, and the plan to leave you. In this state, that guarantees you everything. I don't just want everything, Julian, I said, smoothing the skirt of my dress. I wanted to have nothing. Then we wait, Julian said, tapping the divorce papers that sat between us. If you serve him now, he might freeze his assets or back out of big financial commitments. We need him to overextend himself first. My phone buzzed. It was Chloe. She's pushing him. Chloe's voice crackled through the speaker. Sarah is demanding a 5-bedroom house in the hills. She told him the baby needs a proper environment. She's delusional. Mark can't afford that mortgage without your salary. Perfect, I whispered. Thanks, Chloe. I hung up and drove home. Mark was sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by glossy real estate brochures. He looked stressed, tapping a calculator furiously. Hey, I said softly, walking in. What's all this? Just looking, Mark muttered, covering the price on a brochure. We talked about a fresh start. This house in the hills just came on the market. It's beautiful, Elena, but the down payment is steep and the monthly rate is aggressive. I walked over and looked at the photo. It was a mansion. Far too big for 2 people, but perfect for a man planning a secret second family. It's stunning, Mark, I said, placing a hand on his shoulder. Why worry about the money? You're up for that promotion, right? Ideally, he said, chewing his lip. But until then, it would take both our incomes to cover this. It's a risk. We should take the risk, I urged him, my voice full of false hope. I'm working extra hours. My bonus is coming up. We can afford it. Don't we deserve a big change? A real home? Mark looked at me, searching for any sign of suspicion. He saw only a supportive wife. He smiled, relieved. He thought he had trapped me into paying for his future with Sarah. You're right, he said, pulling the contract toward him. We deserve this. I'll sign the papers tomorrow morning. Good, I smiled. I'll transfer the down payment from the joint account. I didn't tell him the joint account was already empty because he had spent it all on jewelry. The check he was about to write would bounce, but by then the contract would be binding. Later that night, my phone pinged. A text from Derek. Linda from HR finished the audit. We found the transfers to the jewelry store on the company card. We have him. I looked across the room at Mark, who was happily texting Sarah the good news about the house. He had just signed his life away for a house he couldn't pay for, at a job he was about to lose. What are you smiling at? Mark asked. Just thinking about the future, I said. It's going to be surprising. You look incredible, Mark said, his eyes scanning my body. It wasn't a compliment, it was an appraisal. He wanted to make sure his trophy wife looked the part for his big night. Thank you, I said, smoothing the black silk of my dress. It was sleek, sharp, and dark as midnight. A bit somber, isn't it? He asked, adjusting his tie in the hallway mirror. Black is for funerals. Or for command, I replied, meeting his gaze in the reflection. I felt like wearing something powerful tonight. Well, tonight is about power, he smirked, checking his watch. Once Derek announces my promotion to vice president, everything changes. That mortgage I signed yesterday? It won't even be a dent in my new salary. Everything is definitely going to change, I said softly. We walked into the ballroom. The air smelled of expensive perfume and champagne. Mark strutted through the crowd, shaking hands, acting like he already owned the place. Derek looks serious, Mark whispered, leaning close to me as we took our seats at the front table. He's probably just building the suspense. I'm sure he has a lot on his mind, I said, keeping my hands folded in my lap. My clutch felt heavy with the envelope inside. Derek walked onto the stage. The room quieted down. Mark squeezed my hand under the table. His palm was sweaty. Welcome, everyone. Derek's voice boomed through the speakers. Tonight was intended to be a celebration of our company's expansion. Mark nodded, squeezing my hand harder. Here it comes. However, Derek continued, his tone shifting. The warmth evaporated from his voice. Integrity is the foundation of this firm. And when that foundation is cracked, we must act. Mark frowned. What is he talking about? Recently, a rigorous audit revealed significant financial irregularities, Derek said, his eyes scanning the crowd before locking directly onto our table. Embezzlement, corporate theft, misuse of company funds. Mark froze. Who would be that stupid? Mr. Vance, Derek said. It wasn't a question. Excuse me? Mark stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Derek, surely you're joking. Security, Derek said calmly into the microphone. Two large men in dark suits stepped out from the wings. They walked briskly toward us. Elena, tell him. Mark looked down at me, panic rising in his voice. Tell him about the client dinners, the trips. You knew about them. I remained seated, looking up at him. The trips to Miami with Sarah? Mark's face went white. What? The guards reached him. One grabbed his left arm, the other his right. Get your hands off me, Mark shouted, struggling. Elena, do something, I'm your husband. He reached for me with his free hand, his fingers grasping for my arm. I stood up slowly and took a sharp step back out of his reach. Don't touch me, I said. Elena? He looked at me with total confusion. Why are you standing there? Help me. The room was dead silent. Every investor, every employee, every wife was staring at us. I can't help you, Mark, I said, my voice projecting clearly in the quiet hall. I can't help a man who steals. I didn't. I know about the money, I cut him off. I know about the jewelry you bought her. I know about the apartment. Elena, please, not here. And I know about the baby, I said, raising my voice. The crowd gasped. A collective murmur of shock rippled through the room. Mark stopped struggling. He looked like a deer in headlights, you know? He whispered, I've known for weeks. While you were planning your new life in that big house, I was planning this. I opened my clutch and pulled out the thick manila envelope. I stepped forward and slapped it against his chest. What is this? He stammered, looking at the legal seal. Divorce papers, I said coldly, and a restraining order. You're served. No, Mark shook his head. No, Elena, you can't. It's already done, I said. I turned to the guards. You can take him now. Elena. Mark screamed as they dragged him away toward the exit. Elena, I'm sorry, Sarah made me do it. Elena. His voice faded as the double doors swung shut behind him. I stood alone in the center of the ballroom. I felt Derek's hand on my shoulder. Are you all right? He asked gently. I looked at the closed doors. I'm better than all right. I'm free. You're in the clear, Mrs. Vance. Detective Vance closed his thick notebook with a snap. He sat across from me in my living room, looking tired but satisfied. So, I'm not a suspect? I asked, keeping my hands folded tightly in my lap to hide a slight tremor. No, he shook his head. Your statement, combined with the tip-off to the CEO, proves you were unaware of the embezzlement until recently. You're a witness, Elena, not an accomplice. And Mark? He posted bail an hour ago, Vance said, standing up to leave. But with the amount he stole, he's looking at significant prison time. Don't let him intimidate you. He doesn't scare me anymore, I said, standing up to walk him to the door. He's just a stranger now. Once the detective left, I didn't waste a second. I had already packed the few things that mattered, my clothes, my grandmother's locket, and the photo of the baby's ultrasound. Everything else could rot in this house. I dragged my suitcase down the driveway just as a taxi pulled up to the curb. Mark stumbled out. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His tuxedo from the gala was wrinkled, his tie missing. Elena. He shouted, rushing toward me. Where are you going? Away, I said, popping the trunk of my car. You can't leave. You have to fix this. He grabbed the handle of my suitcase. Call Derek. Tell him it was a misunderstanding. If you testify for me, maybe they'll drop the charges. Testify for you? I laughed, shaking my head. Mark, I'm the one who gave Derek the audit logs. Mark froze, his mouth falling open. You did what? Before he could scream, a red convertible screeched into the driveway. Sarah jumped out, slamming the door so hard the car shook. She wasn't glowing today. She looked frantic. You! She pointed a manicured finger at me, storming across the lawn. You ruined everything. Hello, Sarah, I said calmly. I see you heard the news. The bank called. She shrieked, ignoring Mark completely. They pulled the mortgage approval. They said Mark is unemployed and under investigation. We lost the house in the hills. That's unfortunate, I said, leaning against my car. I guess you'll have to stay in your apartment. I can't raise a baby in that shoebox. Sarah yelled, her face twisting in ugly rage. We need money. Mark, tell her to fix it. Mark turned on her, his eyes wild. Is that all you care about? The house? I'm facing jail time, Sarah. I don't care about jail. I care about the life you promised me. Sarah screamed back, shoving his chest. You said you were rich. You said she was the burden. Now look at you. I bought you everything. Mark roared. I stole for you. And now you're useless. I watched them turn on each other like starving wolves. It was the most satisfying sight of my life. Hey! I shouted over their bickering. They both stopped and looked at me. You wanted my life, Sarah, I said, my voice cutting through the crisp afternoon air. You wanted my husband. You wanted my place in this family. I got into the driver's seat and rolled down the window. Now you have him, I smiled, starting the engine. Good luck paying for his lawyers. I backed out of the driveway. As I drove away, I saw Mrs. Higgins standing by her hedge, watering her hydrangeas with a massive grin on her face. Behind her, Sarah and Mark were still screaming on the lawn of a house neither of them could afford. The silence in the new apartment wasn't heavy like the old house. It was just empty. The war was over. The screaming was gone. The police sirens had faded. Now there was just me, a twin-sized bed, and the box of baby things I had refused to unpack. Elena? Aunt Martha knocked softly on the bedroom door. I made soup. I'm not hungry, Auntie, I whispered into the pillow. The pillowcase was damp. It had been damp for 3 days. I didn't ask if you were hungry, Martha said, pushing the door open with her hip. She carried a steaming tray. I said I made soup. You need to eat. She sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped under her weight. She brushed a hair off my forehead. You look terrible, she said gently. I feel terrible, I admitted. The anger, it was keeping me upright. Now that it's gone, I feel like I can't stand. That's because you're finally grieving, honey, Martha said, handing me the spoon. You were too busy fighting a battle to mourn your boy. It's okay to fall apart now. You're safe here. I took a sip of the soup. It was warm. I miss him, Auntie, not Mark. I miss the baby. I never got to hear him cry. I never got to see his eyes open. I know, Martha whispered, her eyes filling with tears. I know. We sat in the quiet for a long time. It was the hardest part. The revenge was loud and fast. This was slow and aching. But at least the air here was clean. There were no secrets hiding in the closets. No perfume on the sheets that wasn't mine. A knock at the front door made me jump. I'll get it, Martha said, taking the tray. A moment later, Julian walked into the bedroom. He wasn't wearing his expensive suit today. He wore jeans and a soft sweater. He looked out of place in my tiny room. I brought coffee, he said, holding up 2 paper cups. And no legal papers. I sat up, pulling the blanket around my shoulders. I probably look like a ghost. You look like someone who just walked through fire, Julian corrected, handing me a cup. How are you holding up? I feel empty, I said, blowing on the steam. I destroyed his life, Julian. I took everything. But it didn't bring my son back. Revenge doesn't fix the loss, Elena, Julian said softly, leaning against the dresser. It just balances the scales. You didn't do it to heal. You did it to survive. Did I survive? I asked, looking at my trembling hands. I feel broken. Broken things can be put back together, he said firmly. You faced the worst betrayal imaginable and you didn't let it kill you. You're stronger than you think. I looked at him. He was right. I was in pain, but I was breathing. Maybe, I whispered. One day is all you need, he smiled. The fluorescent lights of the county jail were headache-inducing. They hummed with a low buzzing sound that made my teeth ache. I sat on the metal stool, staring at my reflection in the thick plexiglass partition. I shouldn't have come. Julian had told me not to. Aunt Martha had told me to let him rot. But when the inmate call came through for the 20th time, curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see what was left of him. The heavy steel door on the other side buzzed open. Mark shuffled in. My breath caught, not in sorrow but in shock. He looked 20 years older. His hair, usually styled with expensive gel, was limp and greasy. His skin was a pasty gray and he had lost at least 30 pounds. The orange jumpsuit hung off his frame like a sack. He sat down heavily and snatched the phone off the receiver. He pressed it to his ear, his eyes wide and desperate. "Elena," he breathed. His voice was cracked. "You came." "Thank God." I picked up the phone slowly. "You called enough times, Mark." "I didn't think you'd answer," he said, leaning forward until his forehead almost touched the glass. "I need help, Elle. You have to help me." "Help you?" I asked calmly. "I'm not your lawyer. My lawyer is an idiot." Mark spat, glancing nervously at the guard in the corner. "He says I'm looking at 5 years minimum. 5 years, Elena. I can't survive in here." "You have to talk to Derek." "Derek isn't speaking to you," I reminded him. "You stole $250,000 from him. If you talk to him, tell him I'll pay it back. Tell him to drop the civil suit. And the alimony demands, Elena, please, you have to drop them. I have nothing left." They froze everything. "Where is Sarah?" I asked. "Can't she help you?" "She seemed very invested in your assets," Mark flinched. A bitter laugh escaped his lips, sounding like a bark. "Sarah?" He looked down at the scratch counter. "She's gone." "Gone where?" "Who knows," he muttered. "The day after the arrest, when she realized the accounts were locked, she took the car and left. She didn't even pack my clothes. She just left." "I told you," I said, my voice flat. "She didn't want you. She wanted the lifestyle." "I know." Mark slammed his fist against the counter, making me blink. "I know that now." "I was stupid, Elena. I was grieving and I made a mistake. A horrible mistake." He looked up at me, tears streaming down his hollow cheeks. He pressed his hand against the glass, right over where my hand was resting on the ledge. "I miss you," he sobbed. "I miss us. I miss my wife. Please, Elle, I know you still love me. We can fix this. Just help me get out of here and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." I looked at his hand. I looked at his tears. I waited for the anger to flare up, hot and burning like it had at the dinner party. I waited for the sadness that had kept me in bed for months, but there was nothing. It was like looking at a stranger. A pathetic, sad stranger. "Mark," I said softly. "Yes?" Hope flared in his eyes. "You'll help?" "No," I said. His face crumbled. "What?" "But you loved me." I stood up, smoothing down my shirt. I looked him dead in the eye. "The woman who loved you died the day she came home from the funeral," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I'm just the stranger who survived." "Elena, wait." I hung up the phone. "Elena." "Don't walk away." I turned my back. I could hear the muffled thuds of his fists banging against the glass, screaming my name. I didn't look back. I just walked toward the exit, and for the first time in a long time, the air felt light. "Hey, little one." I knelt down and placed the bouquet of white lily against the cool granite. The stone was warm from the bright afternoon sun, a stark contrast to the freezing rain of that terrible day 1 year ago. "I brought you fresh ones," I whispered, brushing a dry leaf off the engraved name. "Thomas." "Aunt Martha sent her love. She's knitting again. It is a complete disaster, but she says it keeps her hands busy." I chuckled softly. The sound felt foreign but welcome in my throat. "I'm okay, Thomas," I said, tracing the date on the stone with my thumb. "I really am. The new job is good. In the support center, it's hard work, but I'm helping people. I told a woman yesterday that she would survive, and for the first time, I actually believed my own words. The warm wind rustled the heavy branches of the oak trees overhead. It sounded like a gentle sigh. "I have to go now," I said, dusting off the knees of my jeans. "But I'll be back on Sunday." I turned my back on the grave and walked down the long gravel path. The air was crisp and bright. At the gate, a black sedan was parked in the shade. Julian was leaning against the hood, looking up when he heard my footsteps. "Take your time," he called out softly. "There's no rush, Elle. I'm done," I said, stopping in front of him. "You sure?" He searched my face, looking for the cracks that used to be there. "It's a nice day. We can stay." "I'm sure," I nodded. "I'm ready to go home." He opened the passenger door for me. "How was it?" "Peaceful," I said. "He feels at rest, finally. And you?" Julian asked, his eyes intense. I'm getting there. I got you a coffee. He gestured to the cup holder. Oat milk. 2 sugars. You remembered, I said, sliding into the seat. I remember everything about you, Elena. He shut the door and walked around to the driver's side. I watched him through the windshield. He had been my lawyer, my defender, and now my anchor. I wasn't ready to give him my heart. It was still healing, but I was glad he was here. So, Julian said, starting the engine, what's the plan? Do you want to grab lunch? Or head to the center? Let's drive for a bit, I said, rolling down the window. I want to feel the wind. You got it. As the car pulled away, I took a deep breath. The air smelled of spring. It didn't smell like grief anymore. I thought about Mark and Sarah. They felt like distant characters in a book I had finished reading. I realized I didn't just survive the betrayal. I outgrew the life that was too small for me. I outgrew the woman who needed a man like Mark to feel valid. I was someone else now, someone forged in fire. I looked over at Julian, then at the open road ahead. For the first time in forever, I smiled.